China. Currently the world's largest economy and one of its oldest civilizations. It engineered some of the world's greatest trading routes, and it's still breaking new ground.
This state-of-the-art high-speed train is a perfect example of just how advanced the country's transportation network has become. But I'm not here to figure out the newest way to get from place to place. I'm here to explore one of the country's oldest transportation routes and see how it transformed ancient China.
I'm Jeff Hutchins. I'm a National Geographic photographer, and this is China's Grand Canal, the world's oldest and longest man-made waterway system. It changed the way people in ancient China traveled and traded. It's still used today, yet barely known by the outside world. I'll be visiting the retreats of emperors and imperial officials and checking out some of China's most famous water gardens. And I'll be photographing the descendants of the ancient tradespeople who live along its banks.
By witnessing the lives of those who still use the canal as their livelihood today, I'll discover how this ancient marvel preserves a living past and continues to influence modern China.
The Grand Canal is an engineering marvel that stretches over 1,700 kilometers, connecting Beijing in the north to Hangzhou in the south, passing through some of China's richest provinces. I'm heading to Jiangsu province, home to about a third of the canal's waters. It took over 1,000 years and an estimated 1 million people to build it. That's more time and manpower than the construction of Egypt's Great Pyramids. For the past 15 years, I've traveled the world for my assignments, from Asia to the Arctic and pretty much everywhere in between. But China's one place I feel connected to more than any other. I was lucky enough to spend part of my childhood growing up here, across 3 different regions of the country. But the Grand Canal is one place I've never had the chance to explore. Jiangsu's section of the Grand Canal is the most ancient part of the waterway, and where its earliest trading towns still flourish. I'm hoping to learn about the canal's historic past, while still seeing how it's a lifeline for modern trade and transportation today. I'm starting out in the ancient city of Suzhou in southern Jiangsu. Suzhou has long been an important trading hub in China, famous for its waterway labyrinths, which connect to the Grand Canal. I meet with local guide Lisa Zhou about life by the canal.
Actually, they feel very happy. Local people, we usually say that we do have a peaceful mind. So that's why we do have sentence saying that there is paradise on earth. Suzhou.
How was the canal used historically?
This Grand Canal used to transport rice, vegetable, and wheat. And nowadays, the local people still use the boat for transportation.
I'm intrigued by Suzhou's industrial past and curious to see what sets it apart from other cities across the country.
The rice, bean, fruit, and tea trades via the Grand Canal all contributed to Suzhou's strong economy. But there was one product more than any other that put them on the map, and that was silk.
Suzhou has been manufacturing silk since the Tang Dynasty, when most of the high-grade silk produced for royal families was made here. I've come to the #1 Suzhou silk factory. Founded in 1926, this award-winning company spins the highest grade filature silk in China from its own silkworms. In ancient Jiangsu, Suzhou silk was legendary. The Grand Canal transported it all across China, and even emperors coveted its fine brocades.
I love the visual structure and just the aesthetic grit that you get from photographing heavy machinery like this. It's pretty cool.
Seeing such heavy industrial machinery produce such delicate material, and watching the concentration and focus of the workers as they turn the cocoons into fine thread is fascinating. The canal waters are not only conducive to silk making, but are also creatively inspiring to Suzhou's embroidery craftsmen. I'm headed to the Suzhou Embroidery Research Institute, where modern embroiderers have followed in the footsteps of their ancestors who served the great emperors. In ancient times, hair-thin needles were used to create art that rivaled paintings. Today, this art form still flourishes.
你为什么做得这么好？
Being in this beautiful city, listening to the joyous flows of the waters every day, looking at such beautiful scenes at work, we are then able to produce such beautiful embroidery works. We believe that Suzhou's water has nurtured our people, giving us sensitive minds and dexterous hands. Being able to live in beautiful Suzhou makes us very happy.
As the Grand Canal brought trade and wealth, the status and popularity of Suzhou as a place for rich merchants and imperial officials grew. During the 1400s, known as the Ming period, Suzhou became a political and economic center of imperial China. Ingenious civil servants used the canal waters to create stunning landscapes. As a result, Suzhou is home to some of the most impressive gardens in the world. This is called the Humble Administrator's Garden. It belonged to an imperial inspector from the 16th century called Wang Xianqian. Wang avoided ostentatious displays of his wealth and instead used his riches to create meditations on natural beauty. It took his landscapers 16 years to complete this sprawling 5-hectare paradise. It's a beautiful garden designed like a series of paintings, with each landscape framed by windows or circular moon doors representing heaven. Besides exquisite gardens and precious silk, the Grand Canal also generated untold fortunes through the trade of salt, a highly treasured commodity in ancient times. I'm visiting one of the canal's oldest cities that benefited greatly from the salt industry and still retains its stately elegance. This is Huai'an, home to the historic town of Hexia. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, Hexia merchants sold salt by the shipload from their local salt fields and transported it along the Grand Canal. I meet the living descendants of salt traders, Zhou Guixiang, who's 92, and his 88-year-old wife, Jiang Guixiang.
These stones are unusual. They are old ballast stones. When salt merchants came here, they arrived with their boats filled with these stones. When they reached the harbor, they unloaded the stones and filled the boats with salt. That way, the ships would sail safely with the ballast stone as counterweights. After many years, those ballast stones were used for building roads like this. Years ago, these streets were very prosperous. There were many shops and tea houses and wine taverns. In our free time, we would go to the tea house, have a chat, and listen to the storytellers and watch operas.
Zhou also tells me that old Hexia had numerous gardens, bridges, and many ancestral halls and temples, but only a small number remain today. This is clearly their home, and you can tell they love the place and its history.
你们住在这里多少年了？
我们住在这里很久了。
I've lived here all my life. I'm the fourth generation to live here. Previously, my family used to be salt traders. The salt came from local salt wells and was very precious. There were many salt merchants here who would come from the south to buy it. Back then, salt was highly prized and sent to emperors and high-ranking officials as a gift.
Your children live here? 你的孩子住在这里吗？
No, they work in the cities. They have decent jobs, and I'm very happy about that. We could be the last generation living in this town, but you never know. I hope that when they reach old age, they will return home. That is my wish.
好，谢谢你们。再见啊。
再见啊。
慢走。
It's been a fascinating day and a privilege to meet Joe and Jen. The ancient trading towns of Hexia and Suzhou have given a glimpse to the Grand Canal's industrial past. Soon I'll be walking in the footsteps of an emperor. I'm traveling along China's Grand Canal in Jiangsu province on a photographic journey to document this ancient engineering feat and to see how it's still a lifeline for industry in a modern and rapidly developing China. I've visited the silk factories of Suzhou, and I've talked with descendants of salt traders in Hexia. Now I'm traveling to Suqian on the trail of the Emperor Qianlong. His reign in the 18th century was a golden age in Chinese history, known for a prosperity that the Grand Canal made possible. By that time, it was a well-developed waterway system for the transportation of food, and it helped create some of China's richest agricultural areas.
This section of the Grand Canal is part of the same route that Emperor Qianlong used to take when he would go from the north of the country to the south of the country, conducting state affairs in the 18th century.
The canal was a fast and easy way to conduct affairs of state, or take time off in one of the many palaces Qianlong eventually built. This one is named after the emperor himself, and it's considered one of the best examples of classic Chinese architecture.
This is such a nice place to come and photograph after being on the water and seeing how frenetic life can be out there. And it's so nice and peaceful and relaxing and just aesthetically stunning.
To find out more about the palace in Qianlong, I've looked up Shirley Xia, a local guide.
The Emperor Qianlong stayed here 5 times.
This imposing palace was merely a rest stop for the emperor while he traveled the Grand Canal. But he never traveled alone. An entire family and numerous court officials accompanied him. So they needed a place big enough for the entire entourage.
The layout of this palace is similar to the Qing Palace in Beijing, with more than 20 buildings, pavilions, and the altars.
There are stone tablets here with poems written by Qianlong himself.
All of the poems are about how to control the flood of the Grand Canal and the Yellow River. You can see the poems on the tablet now.
So every time he passed
The builders of the Grand Canal used adjacent rivers to fill the canal and to facilitate construction. But flooding was a frequent problem, dumping sediment and stopping large food transport vessels from freely traveling their routes. It was a constant worry for the emperor.
That's pretty wild that each time he wrote about the flooding.
Yes.
This is the perfect time to be in a palace like this because the light comes in and it's just a perfect interplay of sunlight and shadows, and there's so many cool architectural details here that I can always photograph. I love it.
In ancient China, the Grand Canal was crucial for the transportation of heavy loads of grain from one region to another, sometimes to trade and sometimes to feed armies at war. Trade peaked in the 15th century with a staggering 12,000 grain ships sailing along the canal. Today, the canal is playing a vital role in modern China's construction industry. My next stop is Pizhou, in the north of Jiangsu province. I'm meeting descendants of the famous Haozi boatmen, known for their ancient songs. These are the same songs, the same tunes, the same words that teams of working boatmen would have sung hundreds of years ago. Zhao Qichang is one of the oldest Haozi boatmen living in Pizhou. Birthed on a boat, his family has sailed the Grand Canal for 4 generations.
In the old days, the only way to move boats up and down the canal was by towing them with ropes. It needed 6 men to tow a boat. We chanted to work together effectively as a team. There are very few of us boatmen left. When my generation has gone, we will be no more. I'm 80. We must preserve these old traditions, or they will be lost forever. This is our heritage.
Even though this way of life no longer exists along the canal, it's an important piece of the waterway's history and a fascinating glimpse into the way things used to be. Zhao invites me onto his family's modern boat to give me a sense of just how different life is today. His family transports coal and sand for China's booming construction industry.
I lost my mother when I was 3. We didn't have a home or land, so we buried her in the canal. Back then, we buried people where they died. Life on the boat was really tough, really bitter. We worked in all weather conditions. Even when sleeping, we were on alert and fully dressed in case of storms or strong winds. We had to secure the goods on the boat. Also, we had to tow goods not just one way, but both ways, up and downstream to get enough money to eat. We had to load and load really quickly. It was all very tough.
As we traveled down the river, I caught Zhao's reflection in one of the ship's portholes. And it made me realize that his life along the canal is representative of the millions of others who have come before him. But how do 21st century boatmen live today? Often in relative comfort, it seems. I ride shotgun with Sha Rongcheng, who now runs the family barge and will continue the tradition.
This is my barge, and it took 10 months to build and cost 3 million yen. I make 1 trip a month delivering sand. Shipping has always been in my family, and it's been in my family for generations.
I photograph Lu Ying, who manages the boat with her husband. The strands that obscure her face are the ropes that are used to tie the boat to the shore. And it reminds me that their modern life is always anchored in the past.
This is kind of my favorite part of the day. I mean, the sun is setting, it's perfect, everything is soft, and the sky is just beautiful. Life here on the canal seems like it's undergone such a transformation. We saw the old Haozi boatmen who were singing their songs, and they were pulling these barges up the canal and moving goods, and it was all manual labor. But now it's these huge barges, and they have just about every modern convenience, and they're 2 completely different worlds, it seems like. But it really just makes me want to explore more of what the Grand Canal has.
I'm on a photographic journey along China's Grand Canal in Jiangsu province. I spent time with descendants of ancient boatmen who still carry precious cargo up and down the canal. Right now I'm traveling south towards the town of Laozishan in Huai'an City, where the canal meets Hongzhou Lake.
This is exactly the kind of spot I'm looking for whenever I'm wandering and shooting a photo essay. I mean, the canal here is so full of browns and olives and, you know, various shades of green. So when I see something like this yellow that really pops, it's the perfect thing to give just a little bit of a compositional sort of excitement to a frame.
The beauty of the canal belies the constant threat of flooding from the lake and adjacent rivers. One of the solutions engineers created was to build additional channels to divert some of the flooding overflow. These channels were crucial in keeping local communities alive. Over 200 families live on this lake, on small islands and in modern boathouses. To make a living, they mainly breed crabs. I'm interested in meeting a family of crab farmers, so I'm hitching a ride with local postman Tang Zhenyang. Things we take for granted, like mail delivery, are a much bigger challenge by boat. Many mailmen before Tang have left.
In 2013, I was delivering a university acceptance letter. The weather was stormy, and suddenly my boat overturned in the middle of the lake. I was really scared at that point, but I was also really scared about protecting the mail. So I held the letter in one hand and held the boat with the other. After some time and hard work, I got to the shore and delivered the acceptance letter. Although I nearly lost my life, I got to the shore, and in my heart I was pleased.
Tang lost his job as a teacher in 1999 before finding his feet as a postman. He clearly loves his job now and the mission it gives him. He'll deliver the mail no matter what it takes, and you have to respect that kind of dependability.
Delivering mail is a very important matter to both me and my fishermen friends. It's a way of communicating information with the outside world, so delivering letters on time is my responsibility and my mission.
Tang's first delivery of the day goes off without a hitch. And he introduces me to crab farmers He Ji-chun and Sun Chen-jun, who have continued the family business from a small cottage surrounded by the vast expanse of Hongze Lake. They ask me to accompany them out onto their skiff to feed the crabs. But the lake's infamously tempestuous weather strikes without warning.
This wind just started out of nowhere, and we're gonna tuck in and go, I think, have some food or something, because there's no way we're gonna get out there and feed any crabs right now. It's just, it's storming pretty hard. But it gives you a little bit of a sense of just what life must be like for these guys on a daily basis.
The storm reminds me that the weather here dictates their day-to-day lives. The one constant they have is their family, and they depend on each other to get the job done.
We are 4 in the family: my husband, myself, my son, and my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law lives on the smaller boat next to us. She's getting on in age and set in her ways. She's not willing to live on this bigger boat.
Sun's mother-in-law is in her 80s now. She has always lived on Hongze Lake, and despite having a room on the new family boat, she still prefers to live on the old one. It's how she grew up, and it's where she feels the most comfortable. Lunch with this family is a feast.
你们平时吃什么?
Usually it revolves around fish. My family have been at the lake for a few generations and lived off the fish. You have to eat this. It's very tasty.
The weather clears after lunch, so we head out onto the water. Hongsa Lake is famous for its crab, and each farmer has his own technique. He and son spread young crabs across the lake and feed them daily until they grow large enough to take to market. It's a fair bit of manual labor.
It's very hard to be a fisherman. Even when it's pouring, we have to go out and fish in the lake. The income is good, but it's really tough work. Here, you try releasing a few.
哇，这个大的，很小的。他们现在很高兴吗？不。
Our son works in the town, and I guess his income is pretty good. Our family have been fishing for many generations, and we are probably the last generation to do this. It's really tough work. We don't want our son to do this.
I find that the people who live along this lake, from Tong the postman to the crab farmers, have a real affinity for their surroundings, despite the hard work and the unpredictability of the weather.
You experience a storm like we had today, and you realize that life here is like life everywhere, that there's really no one experience that defines it. You can be out in the open water just rowing for mile after mile, or waking up at the crack of dawn to feed crabs so that you can feed your family. And it's cool to see this richness of life in one long stretch that cuts through most of eastern China.
I'm on a journey down China's ancient Grand Canal in Jiangsu province. I've come to Yangzhou, a busy hub that was built on the back of the salt trade. China's Grand Canal brought massive wealth to the communities it flowed through. And Yangzhou is one of the most famous of those communities, known for its landscape gardens that have been preserved for new generations to enjoy. My first stop is Slender West Lake, for a taste of what life was like for the rich in ancient times. The wealthiest merchants made their fortunes by trading up and down the canal, and they settled on either side of this beautiful lake. They used the fresh water to create exquisite gardens that are best enjoyed by boat. And there's an atmosphere here of reflection.
As a photographer, you drop into some pretty cool, tranquil, peaceful settings. Sometimes they're even a little romantic, and that's when you realize that it's just you on the boat, and you're all by yourself.
I like photographing people being in and moving through old places. There's intrigue and timelessness in these moments. Beyond its rich gardens, the Grand Canal facilitated the movement of food between regions. So naturally, people began sharing recipes. Northern and southern flavors blended successfully in Yangzhou, creating the famous Huaiyang cuisine. It gave birth to dishes like crab soup dumplings, and thousand-layer cake, wild vegetable steamed buns. I met with Chef Chuan, who runs a local restaurant.
我们吃运河的名菜，当地的名菜。这个季节的最好的。
The dish we are making today is squirrel mandarin fish. It's the sort of dish the emperors love to eat.
That's pretty impressive. 真师傅，你真厉害。
我们在当地自学了5年。
You need at least 5 years of experience to be able to slice like this.
把它切完了以后。
As a shipping route from north to south, the Grand Canal played an important role in China's economy and culture. It played an even more crucial role in the evolution of Huaiyang cuisine. Emperors from past dynasties and merchants brought different ingredients from various regions to Yangzhou. For China's cuisines, there are 4 major ones. There is Sichuan, which is spicy because of the region's humid and damp conditions. Shandong, where flavors are bold and heavy. Cantonese cuisine, which is fresh and light,
And then there's our Huayan cuisine, moderate in flavors and a melting pot of northern and southern styles.
I'm betting that this will taste as good as it looks.
这个是黄瓜，
说一黄瓜，
戳鱼黄瓜，真的
拌一
好吃。
拌，拌一拌。
This is our signature cuisine, lion's head. The meat is very moist.
So I notice you guys consume a lot of vinegar.
Vinegar combats greasiness, and it has a lovely aroma. It's a great companion to us chefs. Xinjiang, in our province, is the best vinegar in China.
In fact, the Chinese invented vinegar. The nearby town of Zhenjiang produced one of the 4 famous vinegars of China. I'm curious as to how vinegar is made, so I'm going to the local Hengshun vinegar factory to learn the art of the ancient industry. There are many, many different types of vinegars, and each one claims to have some sort of medicinal properties, from soy vinegar, which is supposed to help with your entire circulatory system, to walnut vinegar, which is supposed to improve cognitive functioning. I'm not totally sure about the scientific claims on all those, but there's one thing that I know for sure, and that's they're all delicious. And strong. Very, very strong. Founded during the Qing Dynasty, Hengshun Industries got its start in 1840. Here in the museum section of their factory, I'm going to find out what ancient methods they used to make vinegar centuries back. The first step is taking a high-quality glutinous rice and soaking it for about 24 hours. After that, they put it in the steamer for just about an hour to kickstart the fermentation process. Once it's been steamed, it's rinsed with cold water. And after the rice cools, they lay it out in these vats. Then add some yeast and let it sit for about another 24 hours. For the next 3 weeks, the rice is turned over. Wheat, bran, and chaff are added to continue with the fermentation process. Water is poured over it for 3 days. All the while, the mixture becomes more and more concentrated. The final stage is to age the vinegar, anywhere from 6 months to 20 years. The Grand Canal never fails to amaze with its age-old traditions that have survived for centuries. From the creation of vinegar to stunning gardens to unique cuisine. But the Grand Canal is also an ultra-busy modern waterway. And I'll soon find out what it's like to earn a living along its banks. Not all 1,700 kilometers of China's Grand Canal is in active use. But in the town of Yangzhou, many of the canal's ancient gardens have been preserved. This is Ge Garden, named after the shape of the bamboo leaves, which resemble the Chinese character Ge. I want to photograph people enjoying themselves in this Qing Dynasty era garden. Sometimes people think that if you want to get a great image, you have to go to a spot that no one's ever been, but it's also just as fun to photograph an area like this. And when you have busloads of tourists drop in, you get all kinds of hits of color and quirkiness. It's great. This garden of rock grottos and bamboo groves belonged to a rich salt trader named Huang Jiyun. When the Grand Canal made him wealthy, he spent it on this private retreat. Rock structures are one of the most fundamental elements of Chinese gardens. And the canal made it possible to transport the raw materials from other parts of the country. They were chosen for their unique shapes to represent China's mountains and other elements of the natural world. You know, what's cool about Ge Gardens is being able to catch people wandering through a beautiful landscape. It's a dynamic contrast to the 21st century and ancient history. I love these moments, just watching people interact with their environment. From Yangzhou, I traveled south to a major harbor in Zhenjiang, where the mighty Yangtze River meets the Grand Canal. Home to a number of ports, the average water depth here is up to 10 meters, which is deep enough for luxury liners or container transportation. Hundreds of millions of tons of cargo pass through every year. Ancient engineers were responsible for harnessing the power of the Yangtze to create this gigantic waterway. And I want to capture that sense of the Yangtze's scale. The harbor's size meant that it could integrate a variety of industries. So besides large ships, small fishing boats have also profited from the hustle and bustle. I'm curious to learn how these small businesses have thrived despite massive competition. So I look up Chuan Jianliang, who has fished these waters since he was a boy.
你好.
你好.
These boats all seem like they have a ton of character. 为什么这些船停在这儿?
When I was younger, I used to live on a boat, like that one over there. Later on, we moved to a house up there in the village. My father was a fisherman. I joined the family business when I was young. It was a tough life then, but it's not so bad now. My father only earned a few dollars a month. We were on the breadline, but now we can make a reasonable living.
Chuan invites me out onto his boat. Despite the small-scale setup, he still makes a tidy profit from a local delicacy called the knife fish. Knife fish are small and elegant swimmers. They're highly sought after and have a reputation for being quite delicious. Their relative scarcity has made them one of the most expensive types of fish in China.
We're pretty much a small fish in a big pond when it comes to relative boat sizes out here. I think I can speak for everyone on our boat when I say I hope we don't become a barnacle on the underside of one of these large and in-charge barges.
Chuan's fishing spot is in midstream of the harbor. It's a dangerous place where large ships pass right on either side of their small boats. Keeping an eye on safety, but to maximize their catch, the fishermen stretch a net between the two boats.
下来，下来，下来，拖下来，下来。
As you can imagine, things can go wrong very quickly if the net gets caught on a passing liner. But thankfully, 2 hours go by without incident, and Chuan calls for the net to be pulled back in.
Sometimes we catch a female carrying roe, and people like that too.
一条鱼多少钱? How much is each one?
We get about 200 yuan for each one.
Around 30 bucks or so. That's pretty expensive, 很贵.
That was one of the most frenzied fishing experiences I've ever had. But for these hardworking fishermen, it's just another day at the office.
I'm kind of amazed at just how many economic ecosystems the Grand Canal and all the waterways that feed into it support. Because you have these massive, massive barges that are transporting millions of tons of equipment to feed heavy industry. And then you have these little mom and pop fishing outfits that consider a successful day if they're catching, 2 or 3 fish. And I'm a little bit surprised that they're all able to coexist, but somehow they figured out a way to make it happen.
My journey on China's Grand Canal in Jiangsu province is coming to an end.
The sheer volume of modern traffic has made it necessary to build new, wider bypass canals to help ease just some of the congestion.
The benefits are obvious in Changzhou, where the old Grand Canal runs right through the heart of the city. The canal has become a tourist attraction and a hub for prime real estate developments. But I find myself drawn back to the town of Suzhou. This was a bustling center of trade and administration, with hundreds of bridges crisscrossing its waterways. The arts flourished here alongside matters of commerce and diplomacy, and visitors to Suzhou enjoyed Chinese opera performed on floating stages, the most popular style of which was called Kunqiu opera. Originally developed here, Kunqiu opera dominated Chinese theaters between the 16th and 18th centuries, and it's still performed today. I'm visiting the Suzhou Shantang Kunqi Opera House to photograph a new generation of Chinese performers. Zhu Liming is the artistic director.
My expectations of the actors is that after they like Kunqi opera, they must work very hard to learn it, to acquire all of Kunqi opera's essence, and then to show the rest of the country and the world the charm of the Kunqi opera. Kunqi opera is the ancestor of our country's performing arts.
Kunqi is a combination of dramatic storytelling, ballet, poetry, and music, incorporating other elements like mime and acrobatics. A dance movement or gesture accompanies every word sung or spoken. I'm amazed at how this 600-year-old art form still captures the imagination. You don't even have to be a Kunqi opera fan to get a kick out of the show. A tip of the hat to Master Zhu and his young students for preserving the tradition for the next generation. My final destination on the Grand Canal is the town of Wuxi. During the Qing period, it was an agricultural powerhouse known as the land of rice and fish. By the 19th and 20th centuries, it became a leading textile producer, with silk being a major export.
Back in the day, traders from all over would travel along the canal here in Wuxi in their wooden boats conducting business. And it was these merchants who helped establish the city's reputation as a major commercial hub.
Traveling by boat through Wuxi, I'm able to see its ancient canal-side homes. While the structures may have been restored, the home design hasn't changed. And many people still use these canal-side homes for leisure, with old jetties converted into places to drink tea and relax.
You know, part of what makes the Grand Canal so fascinating is that as it influences the lives of the people who live along its banks and on the decks of its barges, they too influence the geography of the canal. And I think it's a beautiful story between a people and a land, and it's something that's going to continue for generations. But even more so, it's that emperors and common citizens alike realized the significance that this waterway could have. And they created something that's not only a force in the natural world, but also across social and cultural landscapes.
During my journey along China's Grand Canal, I've seen how products like silk, salt, and even vinegar revolutionized trade in ancient times. I photographed stunning gardens and palaces, and even farmed crabs and netted fish. I'll always appreciate the passion and kindness shown by the people I've met. The Grand Canal has truly shaped China's history, and over the next few hundred years, I'm sure it will continue to flow through its future.